Hello and good vibes, everyone. I want to welcome you back to another episode of Good Morning Minute. I'm Angelina, your host, and I'm hoping to start your day with some positivity, purpose, and of course, dropping a little cup of wisdom in your direction. Today, we're diving into the topic that's becoming more and more relevant in our rapidly changing work environment. And that is, my friends, generational gaps in the workplace. Have you ever noticed how differently people from different age groups approach work, communication, and collaboration? Maybe you've seen younger employees push for more technology and flexibility, while your more seasoned workers emphasize tradition and structure. With Gen Z, millennials, and Gen X all contributing their unique strengths and perspectives, today's working place is a melting pot of generational diversity. But with diversity also comes both challenges and opportunity. With that, I'd like to welcome our special guest today, Robert. And Robert, why don't you let everyone know a little bit more about you?
Sure. Hi, I'm Robert Gaines. I'm also a podcaster of the Free Time Mastermind podcast. It's a side project. How I pay the bills is I'm in the insurance industry. I was a fraud investigator, and I've been a trainer and a manager in the insurance industry, mostly auto claims. Anything to do with cars are my specialty. And I'm working on a project right now with total loss. So unfortunately, I'm the person that if you get into an accident, I call and I say, well, the damage is too severe. I'm so sorry. We can't repair it. We're going to take it to the junkyard, which is always an amazing and exciting conversation. And I mean that sarcastically because nobody wants to be called and told that they're going to get their car taken away. But yeah, the insurance industry has been really good to me. But I've also recently, I think around March of this year, that's when I decided to write a book, start a podcast, and just a very short bit of that. I was an entrepreneur for a really long time, and then put my dreams to sleep, as many people do, around 2010. And that's when I transitioned into the insurance industry. But early this year, I got that fire again. I thought, I really should be doing something. I need to plant my flag and get out there. So I slowly started to network again. And I love the podcasting because as you know, it gives you a wonderful platform to express yourself, to highlight people that you want to also share that platform with.
Yes, I agree. And I also have a friend that is in the car insurance, and I hear all the stories. So the good, the bad, the ugly for sure. So I understand. Okay. So Robert, let's just jump into it. I'm going to ask the first question here.
Sure.
What generation do you identify with, and how has that influenced your approach to the workplace?
I would say, now this is going to be strange. I wanted to give you, a very unique perspective, and it's actually Generation Alpha that I'm most excited about because I have friends with kids, and the kids that are like 10 to 13, maybe 14 years
Mhm.
old, they are so amazing. I mean, the other generations, and of course, I'm sure we'll talk about them. I get a little nervous when I work with them because again, sometimes the work ethic's not there, and I'm not really sometimes not really sure where they're coming from or what their motivations are. But Generation Alpha, they're readers, they're thinkers, they're critical thinking. I don't know what has changed, but I think we have some amazing things coming in the future as Generation Alpha grows and becomes the senior members of society. But of course, me being Generation X, I get along best with my own, and of course, millennials, and I do have a definite disconnect with Generation Z. I'm easy to work with, but yeah, well, I guess once you ask me more specific questions about the generational differences, I'll let the follow-up questions kind of tell the story on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I do like the Generation Alpha. I mentor some young ladies that fall in that generation, and the conversations that we have. Oh my gosh, I feel like I'm talking to someone of equal measure because we
Yes.
we just go into such detail, and they like to fact check for sure. So they're like, if they don't know the answer, they come back the next day and they're like, okay, let's follow up on this question. And I just love it. The conversations are awesome. But I too am a Generation X person. I lead many of the younger generations. So I've had my experience with millennials and then also the Gen Zs. And yes, too, have had some kind of setbacks and learning how to lead them because they definitely aren't us. So it's not like, hey, go get that job done, and they just maneuver through it and figure it out. I know that as a Generation X person, we kind of just, okay, I'll figure it out. I'll learn and I'll look at my resources. And that's not so much the experience that I've had in the workplace here recently. So, Robert, what do you think are the key differences between us as Generation X and then the millennials and Gen Zs?
I I think it has to do. I'm trying to. I'm on the spectrum, although I've had a lot of training so that I don't appear that I'm on the spectrum. But so I think I have these long answers that I have to self-edit in my head. But I think ours, Generation X, were the maybe the first group of the latchkey kids. So mom and dad both worked. Now dad worked in the backyard. He had a body shop right next door, but he was outside. He was gone, and you don't bother dad while he's working. My mother, she was a welder. She was a pipe fitter and worked for the power company, which was amazing for a woman to be doing that in the 1980s. People don't
Mm-hmm.
realize there she was one of two female pipe fitters at the
Wow.
power plant. So she was really breaking through that glass ceiling. But she would come home covered in you know, everything that welders do. And they didn't want to, they were tired, so they expressed their love by paying the bills and making sure there was food in the refrigerator. But we were Generation X, we were really that first group of latchkey kids. So I
Mhm.
still had some rearing, but there were some lessons that I kind of missed because they weren't around and I couldn't ask for help with homework and things like that because they were tired, and I understand that. The generations after that, I think they're all latchkey kids outside of the parents that chose to homeschool, which is we're talking about a tiny percentage of people. So it's not even really
Mhm.
worth mentioning. The vast majority of people, um, they're more children of single parent homes, and they're almost all some version of latchkey. And there's effects from that. And I think I think at the core that sets a lot of these generations apart because it's really tougher. I know some great single parents, but it's very, very tough. When you have twice as many people mentoring and guiding the children, it can be a little bit better. So we're seeing that those effects in the workplace where they weren't mentored and they don't know how to receive that mentorship. And I think that's some of the challenges I have at work. Let me turn my phone off here. I always have it on silent, so sorry about that. I don't know what happened there.
No, you're good. Oh, well, I will just say that that's a unique perspective because being a single mom myself, I've raised three children into adulthood, one being a millennial and the other two being Gen Zs for sure. And I see versions of that latchkey because as a single mama, I had to have them be more independent and wasn't always hands-on with them. Tried to be as involved as I could. Um, and always as parents too, when because we raised the millennials, we raised the
That's
Gen
right.
Zs, right? It's our fault. Uh, no, they bring a unique perspective too, I think. And then with technology, being one of those front line tools for them, they have really learned how to maneuver that. Um, and with that talent also comes some setbacks as well because it kind of limits their ability to troubleshoot, I feel, in what I've seen in my experience working with them. What do you think are the values that the younger generations bring, or what's the most important value that they bring into their work environment?
I guess I'll answer that in a way that um, what I think motivates them. So if we're talking about the TikTok and Instagram generation, they want to be seen and they want to be heard.
Mm,
I don't mind if and I like to be respected at work and be told I'm doing a decent job. I don't need it to survive, but it's nice. Um, they really need that. They need that dopamine hit that they get from TikTok, and they need a lot of it. They need a way more of it. Validation, I guess, is the best thing to call it. They need a lot of that to perform well. And of course that's tough for Generation Xers to constantly, preen and praise, and because that's just not native to our generation. I'm happy to do it, but the amount that I have to do it is just it's almost a full-time job telling them they're doing a great job. And I, like I said, I didn't come on here just to beat them up, but because one thing that they're really great at um, is the use of technology. And I was a nerd back then. We just said nerd. I was a nerd, so I was a techie kid, and I can communicate fine with generation with the millennials and generation Y and Z because I'm also technologically proficient, but obviously they were born with smart devices in their hands, so they're really good with that. In my just as a short aside, in the insurance industry, it's really strange the segment that I'm in because you have to know it helps if you understand cars. So that's mechanical knowledge. You're
Mhm.
dealing with customers, so you have to understand socialization and psychology. And then there's also the technical because I might use 9 different programs to get through one claim. The younger generations are really great at the technical. Some of them have mechanical, but the socialization part, and this is coming from somebody on the spectrum. So when I'm saying people have socialization problems, they have so that's where they struggle. And when I was in a training role, what I kept telling management is I can teach somebody these programs. I can teach them what buttons to hit. I can't teach them to be polite. They come to the table with that. I can't teach character. That happened when they were 6. That concrete has dried, so I was trying to beg them, we need stronger HR to make these decisions to bring people in with character because well, I'll just stop there because there's plenty we can get to in the follow-up questions.
No, that's good. And I'm just like, wow, yeah. Uh, it is amazing because you're hitting the idea of technology, them being very efficient in it, strong in it, understanding how to utilize it. Almost so much it becomes almost a challenge and a barrier because you talk about the social skills, being able to provide customer service, being able to interact, and they really they really don't understand that concept, and it is hard to teach. Yes, thank you. And writing an email and how to communicate. I think communication, verbal communication, becomes a real big challenge, especially for me, as a leader leading the younger generations. I find myself, I need to get information across to someone. The best way for me to do that so that you can understand the tone behind it, you can understand the meaning behind what I'm trying to deliver and the importance behind what I'm trying to deliver is to just do it verbally. Like, let's rip off the band-aid. This is what it is, and let's move on. Like that's the kind of communication I like to do.
Mhm.
But I've also seen as it's delivered and received that the understanding is very different than what the intention is. And what I've heard as far as feedback is, wow, are we in trouble again? Or wow, is she upset? And it really isn't. There's no feeling behind the delivery of information. It's just information. And so I've had to learn to soften the delivery by kind of prefacing what it is that I'm doing. Okay, this is just an information. I'm letting you know it's coming from top down. I just want you to be informed. If you hear conversations happening, this is what it is. This is why it's happening, and then give the information. So that way I can relieve the anxiety. Has that been like your experience too? Do you see communication also an issue?
It's very time consuming. And um, I know that in 2024 we're not supposed to acknowledge gender differences, and I don't want to get canceled, but I am a man. So I'm very direct. I'm to the point anyway, but genetically, but also being on the spectrum, I'm much more like I'm a binary thinker. It's hot or it's cold, it's wet, dry, 1, 0, like everything. And being autistic, I have to sit there and really pre-plan interactions with people. Now, not so much with the customers, because I have a version of the same conversation every day. And what I did is how people are like, how did you, with this, social awkwardness get through these interactions? Well, I looked at it like a chess game. I decided, okay, in any job, including yours, there's probably about 9 questions on average that you get asked. So we're talking about frequently asked questions. And once you master responding to those 9 scenarios, you've pretty much won the game. You figure out what you need to do. So I treat the interaction like a machine, which is a very autistic thing to do. Um, so I have to do the same thing with coworkers. What is commonly the problem that I'm having with them? So I think of it as a machine. What part of the machine is normally broken? How do I fix it? The part is it's time consuming for me because just like you did, the way you explained it was very verbose. And that's the way I have to talk to them when it would be easier for me to say, Jimmy, if you don't clock in on time tomorrow, you're fired. Which is my
Mhm.
instinct to say, because
Yeah.
punctuality that's my biggest pet peeve. And I'm sure for you as a podcaster, I was here on time, I was here early, and I show up for my own podcast on time or early. And hopefully we'll get into more about our field and how much we compensate these people. And sometimes they still have, struggles with timeliness. But one thing, just to get into some specifics to answer your question, I had to learn the compliment sandwich. So yeah, no, you know exactly what I'm talking. That's corporate speak if I ever heard it.
Yeah.
So compliment sandwich is when somebody's in trouble. Let's just be direct, and you got to start off by saying something good that they're doing. Then you got to tell them the real thing that you were going to tell them, and then you have to compliment them again, which pains me because I just want my boss to tell me what I'm doing wrong and then go away so I can fix it. And thankfully, they don't have to tell me I'm a fanatic at and I like doing a good job. So I don't hardly ever hear from management. Thank goodness. So anyway, hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, I agree too, because I've had to talk to colleagues of mine that are younger, and they're like, well, I just don't hear anything from our upper management. And I'm like, hey, no news is good news. I mean,
Yes.
that definitely, if I get a phone call in the middle of the day, I'm like, okay, something's got to change, something's
Yeah.
wrong, you know. No news is good news, and as long as, and then that's kind of how I was raised into the workplace, in my 20s and stuff, is learning that, hey, if they're not knocking on my door going, hey, where's this, where's that, and the other thing, then I know I'm in the right direction. I know I'm doing a good job, and I just need to keep moving forward. But I've learned that that is not the same for everyone else. And yes, the compliment sandwich is definitely um, something that I've had to incorporate in my own coaching and mentoring. And it is hard. It is time consuming, especially when you've got so many more other things on your
That's
plate,
right.
to stop and go, hey, I'm sorry you're not feeling well, but let's look at, what's this, and really getting them to try to troubleshoot their situation, and realize that, okay, this isn't working because why. Problem solving tends to be a big issue sometimes with helping them, and so I've had to stop and walk them through things, and it's good because then they're learning, and they need someone that's willing to do
Mhm.
that. And I've had to learn to put my ego aside and, and open myself up to helping, because I really do want to see um, the future leaders come in and
Mhm.
be better than we were when we stepped into
Sure.
our job roles, for sure. Um, what do you think about, because you mentioned time, you mentioned punctuality. What do you think about that flexibility? Because with COVID, it unlocked a lot of things. It unlocked remote working, telework,
Mhm.
and more flexibility. And these generations have really just embraced that. They want that from their workplace. What do you think about that?
That's changed in our industry. The other thing too, again, I apologize. There's a lot. You ask a question, and there's a library of information that pops up, and I want to give a good succinct answer. So, um, particularly in many industries, but insurance is one of the big ones where they're saying, look, you need to get back to the office. And thankfully, I work from home, but there's only 12 of us working from home, and we're a big team. But it's because me, Generation X, or just because of my work ethic, they know I don't need to come into the office. I dress like this at home, and I'm never on
Mhm.
camera. I mean, so they sent a handful of us that they could absolutely trust, that they know we're at our desk, they know we're working. They don't have to check if we're using a mouse jiggler, the little thing that fakes that your mouse is moving. They
Yes.
don't they don't have to review my phone calls. And I will say, for the last up until March of this year, I hadn't had a customer facing job in about 3 years. I was in management and training, and then this great opportunity came up, but I would be back to back taking calls from customers again, which is sort of how I started. And I said, sure, great opportunity. And so I kind of took a step down. It's about the same pay, which was fine. Um, but yeah, I the people that are responsible can work from home, but the companies now, and this was the part that I didn't want to go on a long tangent about, companies are using remote work as a way to get rid of people. So what I mean by that is during the pandemic, they let a lot of people work from home. And then these companies started to automate and bring in more AI and things like that. And in these meetings that people like you and I probably aren't privy to, they said, if we force them to come back to the hubs, to the central offices, we can shed that 15% that we need to get rid of. And I watched several companies pull that on people. Now, like I said, I
Mm,
wasn't part and parcel to those meetings, but I know how companies operate when they want to get rid of people. So that's what they'll do.
mhm.
They'll force people back to the hubs, and then when they've lost the number of people that they want to lose, then they might allow some people to work from home. So it's really tricky because, in this litigious environment in 2024, companies can't be honest. Even HR can't even be honest and tell people why you don't even know why you did or didn't get hired because they're so afraid to get sued. So and I think honesty is really important, but unfortunately, I think these companies aren't even in a position where they can be direct with their people.
You know, that's an interesting point because yes. And what I've come to learn is HR is there for the company and
That's
really
right.
looking out for their best interest. Because it's all about lawsuits. It's all about, am I going to have to pay unemployment? We want to validate and we want justification for letting go of people and stuff like that. Definitely have had those conversations. Um, but it's so sad to see the industry because when I talk to my team and we're in social work. So, that's a lot of just documents and talking to
Mhm.
people and trying to get things organized. Um, it's hard and it's hard to do it remotely because it is such a social job. I mean, it's social work. And so asking people to come back into the office so that we are in compliance and things like that, that has been a huge hurdle because a lot of the younger generations want to be in their pajamas. They want to be just at their computer. And if they could talk to people as we are doing on Zoom
Mhm.
or whatever other technology is available for them, they would do that and call it quality work, quality customer service, and it having to help them understand, no, that's not how you can assess a person in a home
Mhm.
environment. Through that is hard to communicate sometimes, and I think that flexibility, again, if not managed appropriately, can be a hindrance. To even those that are looking to continue to grow their career and motivation too. Because when you're behind a desk or behind a computer all the time and you're at home, motivation tends to lack from what I've seen. What about you?
No, not me. No. I mean, my coworkers, yes. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I'm just a rare bird. I had two very hardworking parents.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was working with my brother one time who took over he's my older brother, so he took over the family business. He ran my father's body shop. And one time he was mad. I mean, and he's not normally like that, but he really wanted to say something that he knew was going to get to me. And I was working with him and he looked at me. He said, Mom could work circles around you right now if she was here. And because mom was, she up until probably the day she passed, she was physically strong. She was just,
Mm-hmm.
on time, very serious. And dad too. If there were cars to be fixed, dad stayed up 3, 4 in the morning. He's out hitting hammers and welding on cars and just, I didn't know anything else. I don't even know if I could have been capable of being a lazy kid. And even when they have us on mandatory overtime, I still feel like I'm slacking. And I know that's strange, but I thank both of my parents for being such hard workers. But these kids these days, but yeah, I think this goes back to something I said earlier. The younger generations that I work with, some of them are still living at home or they're in multi-generational households, which is normal outside of the US. If you go
Mhm.
to Mexico, if you go to Europe, India, Pakistan, multi-generational families are that's the norm. The US is kind of unusual in that regard where we're 19 and then we go off on our own and have our own apartment. But now you're seeing that change. And I think I did an episode about that where multi-generational homes in the US are making a comeback. That creates, it's good for them financially, but
Mhm.
also with that financial comfort level of living with mom and dad, there's not that drive to succeed and push and to be the best they can because they're as long as they can go to get their Starbucks and get their little things that they like, they're not going to push that hard. And whereas me and a few of us, we want to move at 110 miles an hour all the time, and then we want to retire and not have to do anything again. I wanted to go back to something you said, Angelina, when you moved
Sure.
from dealing with the social work and dealing with your clients directly, and now you're in management and you're looking at Excel spreadsheets and you're not seeing a transformation. And when I was a kid, Dad would take me around and there were these fire towers off into these national parks, and Dad would point at them and he'd say, "Son, when I was 19 years old, me and a crew, we built that tower. It was 30 below zero." And he was telling me how tough his life was, like parents love to do. But
Mhm.
the big lesson there was that object there, we built that, we created that. And what happens when you move away from a customer facing job or you're a social worker dealing with clients, you no longer get to see that transformation. Whereas even a painter at the end
Mhm.
of the day could say, I painted 1901 Arnold Boulevard. You see that house on the corner? I painted that. And you get
Mhm.
detached from that. And it's very hard to be passionate in your work. So now I'm back dealing with the customers again. And I could say, yes, I got that lady. She was so upset. She was angry at the five people she was working with. And I got her on the phone and I got everything fixed. And you could say that I created a transformation, even though it's not a building I could point at or a tower. And I'm sure you miss that, seeing those kids and seeing those lives transformed.
Yeah, absolutely. I do. I miss it. I also have had to, now that I've stepped into leadership, shift my perspective and look at it as I'm growing the next
Mhm.
leader,
That's
you
right.
know, that succession plan. And I want that person to be way better than I was when I stepped into this role and had to figure it out myself because I know the experience that I had, it wasn't, and being under a boomer workforce at that time, it's not like they gave you much instruction. I mean, they gave you maybe a manual and they said good luck, figure it out. And we did. And we
Mhm.
and we learned our job through that. We trial and error and we definitely did. And I think the difference that I've seen as a leader leading younger generations is they want someone that's going to coach them. They want someone that's going to mentor them and
Mhm.
walk alongside them. And, I try not to be, because it's easy. I've raised millennials and I've raised Gen Zs. And so I have to remember I'm not their mom. I don't want to be their mom, but I
Mhm.
definitely want to be someone that they respect
Sure.
and things like that. So yeah, that is definitely different as far as leadership goes. What about, and one thing that I have seen
Mhm.
with younger generations and even the younger leaders is kind of a undefined boundary between I'm your supervisor and friendship. Like sometimes that gets muddled. Have you seen or
Mhm.
witnessed any of that in your work experiences?
That's the latchkey parent effect I was talking about.
Okay.
Whereas you have that stern parent at home who knows
Hmm.
their role is you're going to crack the books, we're going to do homework, I'm going to check your homework. When that gets removed, um, then the latchkey kid has mom and dad maybe on the weekends, and then they go out and do fun stuff. So mom and dad become friends. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but it has transferred now that they're grown adults into the workplace where um, they don't see the two parents as these leadership roles like they used to. And so that's been lost in a way. And again, that's translating into the workplace. So yeah, people are, I'm not so, that doesn't really bother me as much as some other things. So I don't mind if somebody's buddy buddy. And when I'm in leadership roles, I can switch pretty easy. They can come talk to me about anything. I'm very open about the things that I don't do well. And I think one good thing about leadership is the honesty. And when you show weakness, they tell people, especially men, not to do that. I like to be humble and say, look, when I got here, I was one of the worst at X, Y, and Z. So I admit those vulnerabilities. But yeah, I don't mind being their buddy. But if they do something wrong, I'll turn on that drill sergeant mode because I was in the army for 8 years and I know how to go into that because sometimes you need to say, Tommy, if you don't show up on time tomorrow, you're fired.
Mm-hmm,
Sometimes that
mm-hmm.
is true. So
Yeah, that tough love for sure. I know that I know how we grew up with it.
right.
Um, yeah. So you've kind of hinted about other
Mhm.
things that tend to be kind of areas of differences, or even like areas that create maybe I don't know, just issues when it comes to working with the other generation. So can you kind of elaborate on that?
I'd say the biggest misconception, and I have to be careful here, but anybody I know who's very well versed in economics, and I'm not talking about somebody that went to college and they took a class on it. I'm talking about somebody who's independently studied how economics really works. It's hard once you know that, once you know just like the laws of physics, they're immutable. We know if you jump out a two-story window, you're going to hit the ground very rapidly. Doesn't matter if you're a liberal or conservative. You're going to go down at the same speed. And economics is that same way. And once you understand those immutable laws, you'll see they're not affected by politics. So I don't look through, I know everything's political nowadays. It's
Mhm.
not, it's economic. And once you understand the underlying economics of something, you know how it really should work. That's how I feel. And I think everybody's too polarized and politicized, and especially the younger generations. You see a lot of social activism, which again, in certain ways, it's really, really good. But then when you talk to them, they're not versed in the issue, which is very scary. So, they watch a couple of TikTok videos and they get worked up about something that they can't even point to where that country is on a map, where I would never open my mouth unless I felt like I was very well versed in a particular subject. And their younger generations are far too comfortable with stating views that they really haven't done any research on. And that's frightening to me, especially if they're willing to do harm to people that they disagree with. So yeah, this political violence and all of this is it's really scary. So I would encourage people to do a lot more research, which takes away all of that anger and frustration. But the main thing that I wanted to bring up is there's this misconception, and it happened especially during the pandemic when the economy started doing some really strange things. We just need to pay these people more. And look, I know we've all been affected by the
Mm,
inflation. And it happened
mhm,
under the last two administrations. So I'm not picking on any side because both sides caused inflation to go up. You know,
mhm,
I'm not real crazy about either party. But they said you can get these millennials and Gen Zs to work if you just pay them more. Here's the kicker. On our team, the lowest paid person makes $106,000 a year. And that's the starting salary. Now that's if somebody we're under contract. There's disadvantages to that. You can't take a 2 week vacation. If
mhm,
you want a 2 week vacation, you just get fired. So I work in a really kind of a brutal environment, but the money is really good. But
mhm,
even at $106,000, it helps if you have college, but we have people that don't have college. You need an adjuster's license, and it helps if you have many adjuster's license. But it's one of the few industries you can kind of buy yourself into. You could, let's just say, I'll give you an example. If you're a Texas resident and you're 20 years old, with or without a degree, you can pass that Texas adjuster test. And then once you have that Texas test, you can buy reciprocal licenses in other states. So let's just say you've got 10 licenses.
Mhm.
If a big hurricane comes and there's a big storm, you got a good chance you can get plugged in and put on to a team like mine. And you're making 100. You went from working at McDonald's, and we had people do that. They were in McDonald's before. They come to us. They're making 106,000. They still don't show up to work on time. We catch them not on the phone. We catch them not at their desk. And to my generation, that's incomprehensible to me. That's so far outside of my reality. I really had a hard time wrapping my head around
Mhm.
it. And some of that can't even be excused by, well, they don't need the money. I've had some people say in their first week, Robert, man, I feel, this is going to solve all my problems. We've just had our second kid, and people come and they're desperate and they need the money.
Mhm.
But then when they realize they have to work, and we work 10, 11, sometimes 10, 11-hour days, 5, 6 days a week, 2 or 3 weeks, they blow up. So $106,000 isn't enough. $10 million. And so I try to impress upon people, it's not the number. It has nothing to do with that. Whether it's 15 an hour, they're going to do that same thing at a $20 an hour job. If
Mhm.
if they're required to work and be in their chair and do all of these things. So I just want to get that out there, that there's a big misconception that it's money. We're throwing money at people
Mhm.
and they just won't
Mhm.
clock in on time. We have to let them go. And the revolving door that we have at work, because we have to constantly train these new people. And we have, since we're contract workers, we have clients we're responsible to, that we have to constantly supply talented people to. And we're
Mhm.
having a hard time finding people at 106,000 a year. That's the start. So anyway, that's what I wanted to say. It's not about the money. We're offering
Yeah.
plenty of money, and it's not a sales job or anything. You know what I do? We call people and talk to them about their claim.
Mhm. Yeah. Um, and you're hitting so many things for me because coming from the boomer mentality as far as the work, because that's kind of what initiated my influences as I was in my 20s stepping into the workforce. Um, it was that mentality of work harder. You got to work harder to let your work show so that you get promoted and all those things. But it's different now for the younger generations. They don't want to work harder. They what's the phrase they use? Work smarter, not
No,
harder.
no.
Yeah. So it's a lot of that. They want to get done, and their work-life balance is different. I think I was watching a show, and this young lady is connected to her passion. She's wanting, it's The Voice, is what I was watching, and she's trying out. And she mentioned how she is broke but happy. And so you're talking about money not being a factor, not being a motivator for the younger generations. I think it's connecting passion. So are they passionate about the job? Is it serving a purpose for them? I think that's what really has shifted, because for me, I would $106,000. I'd be like, hey, what time do I have to clock in? Because I'll be
That's
there.
right. That's right. Well, we don't have many issues with Generation X at work, but I've
No.
had some people that were in there. The obviously I won't mention any names, but I've had people come to me, after usually if they're going to leave, they're going to leave at about week 3. That's when it gets real. That's when we put them on the
Mhm.
floor, so to speak, and into the call path. And well, really, they start taking calls after about day 3. So we throw people at the deep end of the pool, and that's just the nature of the business. It's a whole other podcast where I can explain why we're given such short time, because we're a catastrophe team. A hurricane hits, and we just have to find a bunch of bodies, put them on in the phone path. So we get about 3 days to get them going, and then we give them a lot of support. But by the third week, they really get a taste of the volume of the work. And at
Mhm.
106,000, obviously our clients expect a lot of work. You're going to be on that phone all day for 10 hours, which is, again, once you get used to it, it's no big deal. You know, when I launched this podcast, I was on mandatory overtime. I was working 60 hours a week. And I launched a podcast on my one day off, and I was shooting
Mhm.
2 episodes on my day off. And I'm not saying that to brag. I like it. It
Mhm.
was fun to me, so I had to, and I enjoy my job too, even when they have us. I don't enjoy it every minute of the day, but most of the time I enjoy it. And so how I try to explain it to a younger person is that for me, I'm competitive. So when I'm in an environment where I'm taking calls, let's say we're doing total losses. So we're how many claims did you close? In other words, how many people did you get and you paid them for their total loss and we moved the car away to the salvage yard? That's a close.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that becomes a scoreboard to somebody like me. Well, hey, Tony, how many did you get today? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah, how
Mm-hmm.
many did you get? Just for fun. I'm not doing it to beat anybody up. I'm just doing it because it makes my day go by faster. And I like to be, I don't always want to be number one because you can get too much. It could be too much pressure always being number one, but I like being number
Yeah.
two because that
Mm-hmm.
way I can be a high performer and I'm not always under management microscope. Because if you're number one in this industry, you also get looked at because they think you're cutting corners. So it's better to be
Mm-hmm.
the second best or the third best in this industry.
I just want to be in the top three. That's it.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. And you don't hear from management. People leave you alone. I
Mm-hmm.
don't really like to be led. I'm self-motivated, so I don't really want management calling me. And I try to, so when I'm speaking to the younger generation, and I wanted to mention this earlier, I try to think of two things. And this is not, the first thing is not attached to any type of generation. How does someone like to receive information? This is true for customers.
Mm-hmm.
Hope I don't get canceled, but when I do total losses for women, I call them. Men want a text and they want an email, but
Mm-hmm.
a total loss is a serious situation. Sometimes these cars roll down the hill. I call women and they appreciate it. They don't like me texting them and try to do a business transaction via text. And I respect that because I
Mm-hmm.
don't, unlike a lot of people, I'm not afraid of the phone. I like to pick it up and I want to communicate in a way that's the way the recipient wants to receive that communication. Same
Mm-hmm.
thing with these generational differences. I might have a millennial or a Generation Z, and one person is a visual thinker and they want to see my eyes on Zoom, and the other person just wants me to do a chat. So I try to communicate in the way that they receive. So that's how I reach them. And then the second aspect to that is what is motivating them? Most people, it's either money, respect, and I forget I always forget what the third thing is, but they want notoriety. Some people just, want to be told they're doing a great job. They want awards. They want to be recognized. Some
Mm-hmm.
people like me, it's just the money. I don't need the pat on the back. The check on Friday is, I'm like, okay, that's the thank you. Um, so yeah, and that's true for all generations to find out how they like to be communicated and how are they motivated. And that could be a
Mm-hmm.
challenge because you have to get people to open up and explain it. So that's why I have to be vulnerable myself in front of these people when I'm in a leadership role so that they can feel okay to open up. And when you and I were talking about the boomers before, they didn't open up about anything. They were
Nope.
you can, we didn't even know where they lived or what they did on the weekend or nothing. They
Nope.
clocked in
Yeah,
and, their work and their home lives were completely separate, which now everything is intermixed. So
it
hopefully that
is.
was a good answer to your
Yeah, yeah, that was the great answer. So, just kind of moving along, and as we get close to wrapping up,
question.
what would your bit of wisdom be for those that are listening that may be struggling with their management
Mhm.
or just peers? Like, what would be some wisdom that you would like to drop?
Somebody way smarter than me explained to, and this works as far as the claims process that I deal with the customer and also with my coworkers. They said, think of things like links in a chain, and you have to show them the chain and then explain each link of the chain.
Hmm.
And I like to find out with coworkers of any generation or of any gender because sometimes there's cultural differences too, and I try to learn all of those subtleties and how can I best communicate to that person? How do they receive it? But I like to talk about their future. So when that new batch of people come in, I try to find out why did they take this job? Oh, you got a new baby on the way. Okay. And when they call me and they go, Robert, I don't know if I could do this. And when I was in leadership, I took that call a lot about week 3. I
Hmm.
don't know. Yeah, but didn't you say your baby's 6 weeks old? I said, put a photo of your child in front of your desk to remind you why you're
Hmm.
doing this.
Hmm.
So remember, and then sometimes it's a future thing. Like someone might, you and your wife haven't had a big splashy vacation in 6 years. You going to walk off this deployment before you have enough money to do that? And one person who turned out to be very good, they were like, Robert, nothing you could say could convince me. And I said, just do me a favor. I said, earn 10 more $1,000. I said, get that much more in the bank, then do whatever you want. I said, just do that for me. Just make
Mm-hmm.
another 10 grand, because at the end of the day, you're going to have more fun with that or whatever you want. You can pay more bills off. I said,
Mm-hmm.
just make 10 more grand. So I just tried to to get them looking at the future, because a lot of times if somebody's nervous and a coworker is having a problem, they're looking at the now, the problem, the monster's right in front of their face. So I try to
Mm-hmm.
get them to look down the road. Sometimes it's a short term or sometimes very, very long term. So I get them reminding why they came here in the first place and where they're headed. So if that's the closest to some wisdom that I have to share.
Well, I appreciate it for sure, and I'm sure our listeners do as well.
Thank you.
So, Robert, let's say we do have a listener out there somewhere going, "Hey, I would really like to learn more about you and just kind of your podcast." Where could they reach you?
I'm Robert Gaines with the Free Time Mastermind podcast. It's a very strange name, I admit, so it's easy to find. I'm on YouTube. I'm not on any other outlets. I do sometimes post things on Facebook. You can go to freetimemastermind.com. That's mostly there to, if you want to drop your email, find out more about the organization, because we do have a mastermind group itself that's
Mhm.
associated, but I'm primarily a podcaster. And even if someone is curious about that $106,000 a year, although I don't hire people, but if that strikes an interest for people, they can go to freetimemastermind.com. You have an ability to put in why you want to put your email. So you could just say, hey, I saw that podcast. I'm interested in insurance adjusting. So that's the best way to get me. But I'd love for people to view the podcast. I interview entrepreneurs. And if you want to grow a business, it's a great
Mm.
channel to watch.
All right. Well, hey everyone. Thank you again, Robert, for taking time to bless us with your wisdom and knowledge. I know I've grown in insight and perspective. All right, everyone. I think that's a wrap. So, you know who I am. I am Angelina Mojica, your life coach, sending you much love, much peace, many blessings.
Thank you.